Yeah. Already forwarded on into.
Okay, I'll call the November 21st City Council meeting to order. Call the roll.
Abby Hansen,
Here.
John Hawkins,
Here.
Megan McFarland, here. Matt McKinney,
Here.
Logan Welch.
Here. Call for motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States. Indivisible. Item 1, petitions, communications and requests. This is the time of the meeting that a citizen may address the council on a matter not on the agenda. Except in case of emergency, the city council will not take any action at this meeting, but may ask city staff to research the matter or have the matter placed on the agenda for a future meeting. Anyone have anything for us tonight? Okay. I've got something. I've got recognition of the Draycox family on their dedication and improving the Brewer Creek shelter. Like to come up. Let's see.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all you've done there. Yeah. Yeah, I will.
Smile, how long can you smile?
Thank you. Well, I'll that's okay.
Okay, they're on.
But we're looking at the pictures anyway, so. Got my phone?
Okay, guys, we're not gonna get a picture.
Yes, we're not.
I want you to tell them. Speedy, your cell phone?
Sure.
Your phone.
Oh. I don't want to. Trying to be an idiot.
Looks great. Thanks for the work.
That's what it was.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Okay, item 2, minutes, claims, reports and licenses. The following items have been deemed non-controversial. Routine actions to be approved by the council in a single motion. If a council member or member of the audience wishes to have an item removed from this list, will be considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Item A is minutes of November 7th. Item B is resolution on payroll for period ending November 5th and paid on November 11th. C is a resolution on bills and approve the fund list. D is the city manager report for October. E is the police department report for October. F is the fire department report for October, and G is the Hamilton County Solid Waste Commission agenda packet for November 9.
Move to approve collectively.
Second.
All those in favour say aye. Opposed, same sign. We'll go to resolution approving. Oh, no, not that one. C. C. Go to C. Request by Sean Anderson for a hearing before the council regarding an unsafe building located at 719 Des Moines Street. You want to come up to Sean?
Fast.
So basically what I would like to do is ask for a withdrawal of the unsafe building source notice that was given by the city. The notice was given based on a engineer's report from the adjacent building and the owner's insurance company of that building. They did a visual inspection of their building, and I graciously let the guy into my building to look at my building. Found out later maybe I shouldn't have done that, but I let him into my building, and his report is stating that my building is unsafe because of the adjacent building and the ongoing collapse. Now, I have my own engineer's report. I don't know if it was distributed to you, if you had a chance to read it, but it basically states in no uncertain terms that nothing has occurred to my building. No damage has occurred due to the adjacent building collapsing. And in fact, they denied my insurance claim because of that, because nothing has happened to my building. So I feel it's not fair to my business and my building to be given this notice based on one-sided engineer's report without looking at both reports, or possibly having a third party engineer come in that is not affiliated with either my insurance or their insurance.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just to kind of, I guess, update or share with everyone in terms of what was outlined in the memo. So what Mr. Anderson is referring to is particularly this paragraph here that was included in an engineer's report prepared by JEO Consulting. And it says, with the active and ongoing collapse of wall and floor systems in 721, referring to 721 Des Moines Street, such produces a life safety issue for the occupants and pedestrians of 719, 721 and surrounding area. Both structures are not to be occupied until bracing measures have been implemented. The area around both structures are to have appropriate fencing measures installed to prevent access. Now, I initially reached out to Sean about a week ago after first becoming aware. The engineer with JEO had raised concerns about the deteriorating condition for the adjacent building at 721. And this came about after another section of the building, roughly around November 16th, if I'm not mistaken. November 10th, had seen a picture from the contractor that showed a major section of that had fallen through. In the prior email and communication with him, part of the siding, the metal siding came loose, and so we made him aware, as well as the contractor and the property owner, that siding would have to be secured. And then the following morning, when the contractor was arriving on site, a large section of the building had fallen and opened up the hole wider, as well as breaking some of the wood structures that were supporting the other sections of the metal siding. I asked for clarification with the engineer with JEO, and he reiterated that based off the new update he got from the contractor, he reiterated his position that the potential issue and life hazard issue with Sean's building, but he didn't provide any specifics as to what the concerns specifically were. And it wasn't until we received the report from JEO last week that he specifically made the statement and various other findings within his report. Now, Sean, at that point, on Friday, he provided the city with a copy of the engineer's report that his insurance had commissioned from KPE. It's an engineering outfit with offices in Des Moines and Nebraska as well. And one of the things that they specifically wrote in KPE's report was that the insured building may be susceptible to damage due to the adjacent structure being secured to the shared wall. Both engineers' reports specifically called out that the wall between 721 and 719 was a shared wall. The JEO report was a little more specific and actually specified that some of the joists were built into the wall itself. And so JEO provided a little bit more detail, and I don't know if that was in large part because of their ability to look at the interior, but also KPE's report was done October 18th. JEO's report was put out November 14th. So at the time when KPE was out there, the deterioration wasn't as prevalent as it was by the November 14th date. So I don't know if that's part of what JEO's engineer had reiterated. They also both spell out that if the building at 721 is demoed, that bracing would have to be done to Sean's building to ensure it doesn't deteriorate and to protect it during the demolition process. JEL's report specifically calls out that it would need additional engineering information on Sean's building to determine the appropriate bracing and what that would entail. And so when Sean visited with me on Friday morning, we tried reaching both the engineer with KPE and we did make contact with the adjuster and was the adjuster for his insurance was informed of the updates as it pertains to the unsafe building notice and was provided a copy of the notice as well as the engineer report from JEL, which he said he was going to forward on to the engineer for a follow-up. So we're following the city code as it pertains to the unsafe building. And so at this point, we're kind of waiting to hear back from both parties to determine whether or not what is the engineer that looked at Sean's building from his insurance, if after reviewing JEL's report, if their assessment changes, if they concur with JEL's report, or what steps he recommends be taking. And then we're also following up and waiting for additional information now that the engineer's report is out from the building owner for 721. Now the contractor is to be working on a plan for how they're going to proceed with abating the unsafe nuisance and demoing the property if they still move forward with that or whatever they choose to do with that property. So we're a bit of a waiting game. The unfortunate part is with demoing 721 is going to require coordination and consultation with Sean and possibly his insurance. And so but that's yet to be seen as both parties work through the information and determine the best course of action for addressing the issue.
I did talk to my adjuster today about 4:30 this afternoon, and as of yet, the engineer from KPE has not reviewed the JEO's report, and they're still waiting for that, so he can see if he concurs or not. And he said that possibly they might want to send KPE back out again to take another look since more damage has occurred to 721. So from my perspective, I totally understand why you sent me this letter. I really do. But I feel like I inspect my building constantly, upstairs, downstairs. Nothing is moved, not a brick is moved in my building, even with the more damage to 721. So nothing has changed on my building from the very moment that building started to fall down to now, visibly. Now, I'm not an engineer, so I'm just telling you what I see visually. Nothing has changed. But by being served this letter, this is detrimental to my business, which is one of the few remaining thriving small businesses in this town. And if these letters are posted on the front of my building, as you can imagine, it's going to damage my sales considerably. And I have 8 employees, 3 of which are here today, 4 of which is their only employment is with me. And if my sales drop dramatically and I have to start letting employees go, I mean, that's 4 to 8 employees that I have to let go, as well as my only source of income. So I guess what I'm asking here tonight is, at the very least, I feel like the city should not be taking the recommendation of an engineer hired by either insurance company, but rather should be hiring their own engineer as a third party, non-objective engineer to look at my building and that building before determining whether I get these signs put on the front or not. Because I feel like it's kind of lopsided. Like their engineer, obviously you're going to protect their insurance company. My engineer's going to do the same thing. That's why I feel like a third party engineer objectively should be allowed to go.
Like the question I have is, the building fell back in September and it's still sitting there, I know we have, the road shut off and everyone knows to stay away from it, of course. I own a building downtown, just a block from Ushan, and if one of my neighbors went down, it may affect the well-being of my homes, and I think that's true about anybody on Main Street, those older buildings. And what I am trying to get my head around though is we're issuing a sign on Sean's wall or door, but we still have this fallen building next to him. Could we possibly wait till that building comes down until we issue this? I mean, obviously, when that building comes down, there'll probably be a day or two you'd have to shut down anyway.
Yeah.
You know, just to have that done. Then we can get in there and look for both sides, not only inside his building that might not even need it to happen, and then also on the outside of his building. See what actually does need to be done to make it appropriate, or if it is not as badly damaged as we think when we actually get real eyes on it. I'm not saying we don't, you know, protect the citizens of Webster City and make sure we make people aware of a building that we may feel unsafe, but I just don't know if we're actually looking at it with the right set of eyes until that building comes down and we see what actually is going to be exposed to the outside.
And I agree 100% that once that building comes down, my building needs to be scrutinized incredibly to make sure that exterior south wall is stable, or everything that needs to be done to it is done to it just to stabilize it. And if that involves me being shut down for X amount of time while that work is being completed, then that's the way it has to be. I just am trying to avoid being partially shut down in the meantime while we're waiting for the other building to get demolition.
But I guess that's more of a question, you know, like what, like, could we wait to issue this until after that demolition has occurred? So we know the actual, we can walk up and touch his exterior wall. We can get engineers on both inside the building and outside the building, on top of the building, on the ground, even, where his footings are on that south face, and then go from there.
Well, I think
Is that an option?
we have been, even with the building at 721 Des Moines Street, we have been in contact and have been communicating with Chuck Brinson, a structural engineering firm that worked on both the lift building and other buildings that the city's been and working with projects in the past few years. And they recommended that KPE's report does not address the unsafe language that JEO brought up. So they recommended that KPE should review the report and address it. But there's looking at KPE's report, it doesn't specifically say that the structure is sound. And that's why I go back to that sentence where it said it's susceptible to further damage because of that joint wall. So
That's referring to with demolition though, correct?
well, it doesn't specifically, let me go back to that.
And so again, to Sean's point, what does our inspection department find?
We have to go off both engineers' reports. If there's nothing in KPE's report that changes or alters the opinion of JEO, or if KPE comes back and said, no, the building's fine. That engineer is putting up his license on the line, because then, okay, we've got in a third party or a second party review. If you want to assure that that building is structurally sound, that engineer takes that liability to a certain extent. But both reports point to the potential damage. The difference is that one report was written about 3 weeks prior to the other one. KPE being written before that major section of that wall collapsed.
Sean, did you say that they're considering coming back out to do a re-inspection?
I believe so, and I feel like it should be at least requested that they do so, since more of 721 has collapsed in the meantime.
But I think they were at a disadvantage not being able to see the other side of the.
I agree, yeah.
So.
And that brings back to my point of asking for a third party engineer that's not being paid by either insurance company.
Well, then the problem comes back to the city gets into the responsibility of paying for an inspection. And then anytime this comes up, they're going to want the city to pay for an inspection.
I understand that, but
It's not cheap.
I understand that, but you're also talking about, again, a small business here that's been in this town for 23 years. And I feel like the city should do what it can to lend a hand to help me stay open.
Yeah, I can certainly understand the concern. I feel for you there. It's unfortunate that the wording from the first or the 721 inspection specifically states their recommendation is that there not be occupancy in the other building, because in their opinion, it's unsafe. And if the city doesn't have that altering opinion from your engineering firm, and somebody's in there and that building goes down, then the city has some liability for not paying attention to what an engineer's report said. That's my concern. I would love to see them come out re-inspect your building as soon as possible and have access to see the other side of that wall. And then I agree, if at that point we have two differing opinions, that they say that the building, they feel that your building is safe, then we have something to act on. Right now, I don't feel like we have anything to act on to say that we are okay with just not issuing an unsafe building. That's my opinion.
How long are we looking at them to take that building down?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask that.
Well, yeah, like I said, we have to follow up with the property owner and the contractor. The question mark is going to be, or a couple are going to be, the JEO's report specifically called out for getting some additional information from an engineering perspective on Sean's building to determine the reinforcements as well as other measures to protect the building from further deterioration. So that's a big part, I think, weighs on hearing back from KPE in this case. And I don't know, we called them on Friday. I never got a call back. I don't know if they tried calling you back either. So I
No,
mean, yeah, so
I spoke to my adjuster today, but he hadn't heard anything from KPE yet. So,
I mean, that's a big question mark. Is we can follow up with the owner and the engineer and the contractor, but at the same time, they're probably going to also wait or want to hear back from KP in terms of what they may be looking at. So we can, from the city's perspective, facilitate a communication or a meeting between all the parties and to determine where things are at, but there's not a immediate timeline to move forward with that.
I can say, I think prior to this report coming out from JEO, the contractor was confident he could have it tore down by Thanksgiving was the date that we were given. But once this report comes out talking about it needing additional bracing, both on the wall that adjoins, but also on the north wall of your property, there's, and as you'll see in the report, there's a talk about putting up a 12-foot column of sorts to keep that wall from going the opposite direction as well. That's pretty well changed the timeline, because now they're saying you have to do a bunch of work before you can tear down before you can demolish it, because they're afraid that once it's demolished, that's when all the issues are going to happen. As a contractor, I'm certain they're not going to touch it until they know that it's not going to come down.
So one thing I want to clarify, and I know the answer to this, but just for the public's well-being, you can still enter the property and Sean can still operate as he did with this, right? It just enter your own risk type thing, right? Correct, Dan? Like that's the.
Yeah, the code specifically says that notices will be posted.
Yeah. And that they have to give notice that, and it was in the unsafe building notice, Sean got to that the city is saying that it shouldn't be occupied. Now, granted, if the property owner wants to stay open, then that's the city can't shut it down per se, if that's what you mean.
well, I reference back to Fuse Pastry. They had the same posting on for a year and a half.
You know, and again, I don't necessarily agree how that was handled, but I think maybe one of the reasons why they shut down was not necessarily the posting, but maybe the work they had to do to make their to get their building up to.
Well, they were retiring.
And they were, yeah, it's just kind of a business that nobody want to take on, but I don't want this to be that type of a black eye, though. I think the council may have been a little hasty on that, so I would prefer if we wait to issue this until we can actually see the wall, both sides. I also don't want to put the city at risk or anybody's safety at risk, but I think this has already got enough publicity and people know that this building is falling down, that they would know, hey, there may be a risk here, but do we need to say that? Do we need to put that on a small business? I don't know.
Well, we're
Not knowing what we can see, because again, like I have two walls that I can't see both sides of on my property. Who knows? My building might be more risky than Sean's to enter, and if we can't see both sides of his wall, how are we going to determine this? And I would like our own inspection department to give their recommendation of what they feel. They've been in and out of most Webster City businesses and downtown, building throughout the years. They might have a better opinion of it. So I just think we're relying on two engineering firms that have a financial interest based on their determination.
Well, and like I said, I think the fact that one was done 2 weeks prior to the other one. And your firm did not having access to see the other side, those are two big factors in my mind. So,
And I want everybody to know, I'm trying to do the right thing here. I do not want any customers or employees to get hurt, obviously. This needs to state that out loud. I mean, I shouldn't even have to say that. But at the same time, I'm fighting as hard as I can to stay open. This is my only source of income. If I'm closed for X amount of days, there's a possibility I can never reopen again. I'm just not in a position where I can be closed down for a month or 6 months. And so does the city want to lose a business that's been here that long? You know, I mean, I guess I'm asking the city to help me in any way they can.
Well, it is a bit of a worry that we don't have a timeline. Because, you know, I mean, if we put this sign up and we're like the Fuse building, we'll be here 5 years later and we're still doing this, exactly the same situation. Because we don't have any answers from the people that are supposed to have this building here this week. That's a bit of a problem. And you know, regardless of what engineers say or whatever else, somebody should have gone in and done something by now, because it sure as hell isn't making it any better, having that building leaning and pulling away from the other building.
It's been quite the public safety hazard for a while now.
Yeah. And you know, it's everybody's diving for the engineers or whatever, but I don't know. I mean, we're at risk as a city because we're aware of the problems that with both, you know, with one of the buildings. Your building is an unknown quantity, and if something does happen and we're aware, you know, we've been told by one engineer that we need to act, and if we don't act, then we're liable. But unfortunately, it is very much like the Fuse building that happened when we first got on council. It was our welcome to city council.
I assume your engineering firm understands that you've been issued this.
Yes, and they were made aware of it Friday. I was issued this on Thursday evening, going into the weekend, so I couldn't really get anything done before tonight, so.
The week prior, when I told you of the recommendations, you tried calling your insurance then?
Yeah. No, not until I was served this notice. Yeah.
And to John's point, that's what I'm struggling with is this building has been collapsed or collapsing since September. And the first rule, and please don't take this as any diminishment of all the work done by city staff. I know a lot of work's gone into this, but the first real public action we're taking is administering a notice to the adjacent building. That's a thriving business.
So that's not exactly.
I'm not, please let me finish. I'm not saying there's not other work been done. I know there's a lot of stuff going on, but the building that's sitting there is the issue. And I want to get that building done before we make another building an issue. If Sean's north face was the one that collapsed, I would obviously understand this, the conversation and the route we need to take. Until we can see both sides of his wall, I don't see why we're making this the issue today. I mean, again, we're protecting our own rears. I understand that. But again, I think everybody in the community knows what's going on in this building next door. And they know it might be a little risky to walk into a building next to a fallen building. Now, I hope they don't think that. I hope it doesn't change any business. I hope, you know, your regulars and even people new to town come in, but it's a blatant sign. There's a building falling in right next to you. So even if they're out from out of towners, they're going to be aware of there might be a possible danger, like intuition. So that's why I just don't know why we got to issue this. I mean, in the long run, I don't know if it'll affect your business. I mean, I don't know. And I don't really want to find out the hard way.
Me neither.
That's why I'm not asking to necessarily not move forward with this. I just thinking we should look at it from both ends of the wall when that other building is down. And that would put heat on the people holding up that building coming down, knowing that we have to get that down to make a proper determination on this building.
Can I say something quick? Because I know John and Logan have said that like the city should have done something more, or that's the perception that we're not.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying.
But like the timing, I know we said it's been September, but understand that the property owner has to get their insurance involved. They had to have engineers brought in, structural engineers. The property is required to be tested for asbestos prior to anything being done. The property then has to have the asbestos abated, which has now been done. And now they have to have a contractor. They had to find a contractor to do the work to tear it down. Now the engineer is saying that Sean's building needs to be shored up before they do anything to tear down this one, because they're more concerned or partially concerned about the north side of Sean's building. That when they start working on this south side, now you have two freestanding walls that were never intended to be freestanding, obviously, because there was a building on the other side as well prior. And so,
Actually, that's not true. There's never been a building on the
Oh, there
north
was-
side of the line. No.
They say that would be a pretty narrow building.
so
Yeah,
So
so
anyway, they talk about the north side being that's the concern. That's when those pictures of the post or column they were talking about. So there's been a lot going on, and we're meeting weekly about it to make sure that we're staying on top of this. And that's,
I understand, and that's why I prefaced it by saying, please don't take any offense to all the work that's been done. I know a lot of stuff's going on behind the scenes. I'm just saying, the building's still not down, and I think that's the public safety hazard, not the coffee shop.
How soon can we get those lateral
It's
supports?
got to be engineered. I mean, that's the point that they made in the report, but the one thing I wanted to point out, so. Sean is here today not because council is going to approve the unsafe building notice. This is just like nuisances where someone gets a notice. And they have the right to appeal. The property owner at 721 has already been served with an unsafe building notice. That was issued the day of the morning on that Saturday when the building collapsed. They chose not to appeal. Otherwise, they would have been in front of you in the same manner that Sean was here. The reason Sean is here is because per the code, it provides him an opportunity for a hearing before the city council based on that administrative action to deem the property already unsafe by the building inspector. So if you want to change it or reverse it, you would essentially reverse the city inspectors, the city's position on it being deemed unsafe based on the engineer's reports. And then you have to determine what recommendation or actions you want staff to take.
Yeah, I understand this is, I understand it's already been issued. Like he referenced several times when I got the letter, when I got issued, I understand that. And he's appealing the decision by city administration.
in my mind, the decision was impromptu based on one side of the engineer's report before seeing my engineer's report, or again, bringing in a third party unrelated. I don't know why JEO says anything about my north wall, since my building was built standing. North wall's always been unsupported. It was built that way, so there should be no issue with my north wall whatsoever. So for them to even bring that into the discussion is baffling to me, why they even talk about that. The south wall should be the only thing they're concerned about. That's the only thing that's being exposed to the elements.
yeah, and I don't know, when we talked about that too last week, Thursday, or whenever the report came out. It was surprising that the north wall was a major sticking point. I mean, it was a lot of.
It really seemed to me like their insurance hired JEO. JEO is gonna give a very detailed report to cover their insurances, but basically. And for lack of better words, they don't give a damn what's going on in my business. They're just covering themselves.
Well, what's the recommendation? Do we issue this unsafe, put up the signs to say it's unsafe? No, but I mean, do we put the signs up saying it's an unsafe building? Which is what happened last time.
I would plead to the council to hold off or to allow Sean to not have those signs put on his building until the south building, the building to his south is completely demolished. And anybody we want could get in there and look at each side of his wall. I'm not saying I'm against deeming it unsafe if a report comes back telling us that after they have access to that wall. I just don't think we should do it until the true public nuisance is demolished and removed.
And I'm in agreement after demolition, if any engineer says that remaining wall is unsafe, I don't want to put anybody in jeopardy either. But the fact that my engineer is at last report saying that nothing's changed on my building, that's why I'm appealing to not get his notification.
So we really need to hear back from him.
Wait for signage until we.
Can we
hear
wait?
back from
That's what
him.
Chuck Britson was their request was that KPE revise their report and address the unsafe portion that they didn't address based on if they've had a chance to review JEO's report.
And,
I think that's probably the stickler here is we really need to hear back from.
yes, and I understand, Matt, what you're saying about the cost of the city to get a third engineer involved, but if you see it from my perspective, my insurance company's engineer is gonna say what my insurance company wants to hear. Theirs is gonna do the same. So why can't a third party, totally objective, be involved?
Well, we've already asked that opinion, didn't we, from a third party, that. And that.
Yeah, but they didn't actually come look at anything.
No, but without spending any money, we reached out to see, and that's their recommendation is to find out from your other engineer. And I think that's probably what we need to do is put off doing anything until we get information from them. That's.
I have a sneaky suspicion that to cover my insurance companies, he's not gonna sign off saying no, JEO is wrong. I mean, because like Daniel said, he would be liable. He's not gonna say, no, it's safe, it's fine. I mean, it's just not gonna happen.
Ideally, I would like to wait till the other building comes down, but for now, if we can hold off till at least more information is gathered and the reports are reviewed by each other, that's a good first step. And we can have more information to discuss this again. Would that be a good consensus?
Yes.
Just buy me a little more time, that's all I'm asking for.
And us to make the right decision.
Yeah. Yes.
Do we need a motion on that or do we just?
Yeah, we would.
Need a- okay.
I'd move to post any signs or actually, let me ask this first, council. Are we holding off on the notice given until we get more information?
Notice is already
Notice is
given.
It's just a matter of what steps.
We're just holding off on putting the signs up at this.
Okay. So I would motion then to not post any signs until engineer reports are reviewed and we can meet again on this and more information.
Again,
I wanted to confirm because I don't know if you have, we're under no obligation, as far as I understand, for you to give us a copy of that KPE report. I mean, because even though you got it a month and a half ago, you didn't give it to us until you were served with actual notice. So I want to understand that we understand each other. Is KPE, is your insurance going to let you, and are you going to provide us that information? Or are they going to hold off on that?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I didn't provide my engineer's report to the city because it said there was nothing wrong with my building.
Do you think that the city and yourself and should get together with these, try and figure out this whole thing here? We try and get a hold of these engineers with the city, and
I would,
so that way everyone will know.
I would appreciate any help you can do here at all.
The hard part is I've already tried with KP. I mean, you and I were on that call and I got his voicemail, and so.
Yeah, but it's Friday afternoon, going into the weekend. Yeah,
And now we're leading into a short week.
yeah. So the timing is terrible.
The motion is to. Yes.
Not post signs until engineering reports are reviewed and council has provided additional information to make a decision.
time frame for that.
Yeah, do we want to, put on like a month or,
Well, we'll have to, I mean, I would think it'd have to come to council again.
The next council.
Yeah, next
No,
meeting.
I don't, well, and I guess.
That something if something comes back meanwhile that says that's detriment, I guess. We'll have to.
Yeah, that was my question in terms of detriment. So let's say in a week's time, or hypothetically, if we get a report next week. I know that might be stretching it because of the holiday weekend, but if by next Tuesday we get a report from KP and KP agrees with JEO's report, is staff okay with posting the signs at that point, or do you want us to come back to the following meeting until then? I don't know what liability issues that creates for us.
Up on the council, I guess, of what they want to do with it. I mean, kind of.
I would prefer to discuss it at a council meeting, an open council meeting, but
So we can call a special meeting if need be too.
yeah, we could.
Yeah, I think it would
stay
stay
forever.
They get some report. If we get a report.
Okay.
We don't wait till the next council meeting.
So you're kind of wanting a deadline of the next council meeting though, to be able to make a decision to move forward.
Yes.
Or a special meeting if it's come before this next one, yeah.
And you can let KPE know that too, that what date, the 5th of December is the next council meeting.
Yeah, I'll
Put
call
some
my,
pressure on them to get something put together
I'll
before.
call my adjuster again tomorrow, let him know that.
For sure.
Okay. All those in favour say aye.
You seconded, right?
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Okay, item A is a public hearing on proposed plan specifications and form of contract and estimate of costs for Lincoln Drive project. I'll open the hearing. Are there any written objections?
Received no written objections.
Are there any oral objections?
Objections.
Friend?
So Lincoln Drive has been on the 5-year CIP for several years now. Council has seen it come down the pike, like I said, for several years. Some of the factors that go into that decision is kind of what we call the trifecta. That is your street condition, which is your PCI report, your water main condition, and then your sewers, so your storm and sanitary. And some of the pictures on Daniel, if you are able to provide them. So obviously the PIC or PCI report, it's considered poor and very poor. Anytime you get a street repair in that condition, there's no repair other than reconstruction. The second picture shows that's a sanitary sewer. You can tell that it's sucking towards the center. So what it is, that needs slip lined because at the joints, it's sucking, causing the pavement and soil underneath. Here's manholes. We're going to kind of rehab those. The top section will be brand new, but the bottom half will be kind of, what's the top word for it? Pretty much you're putting a casting inside a casting. It's like you're not tearing it all the way out. So our storm sewers also, when you consider that, with those, I think I have a picture, Daniel, of the storm sewer intake. Well, we can go back, we go to this one. So this is a sanitary sewer repair we made 2 years ago. Just that minor repair, we tried to hold off. That actually had a big old blowout on the side. That single repair cost us $58,000. So it's really, really, really deep in there. With it being on the end of a line, that's one that we could probably try doing in-house, but all of our digging equipment would not. We had to get a big excavator in here. So it's just that those type of things are getting very expensive. And so with slip lining, which we're starting a program, we need to get on top of that before we have the big expenses such as those of the 60,000. So when it comes to the storm sewer, the intakes out there, they're called like a funnel intake, which goes into an 8-inch clay tile. When you're getting bigger rains that you're seeing now, water's just not able to take that. So we're upsizing some of the storm sewer pipe. And then also the manholes that are out there. Sanitary sewer, they have the holes on the top, or SUDASPEC says that's not allowed. So them all need to be replaced. You can see our pavement doctor contractors out there trying to, touch up this stuff, Band-Aid it. And the right thing to do is to come in here and reconstruct it and do it right the first time. Bids came back from Doyle Construction at $1,376,376. With this project, we did have budgeted 1.299. So we are going to be over budget on this, 284,000 roughly. But we feel just with the last number that came in, we need to proceed with this with Doyle Construction. We've reached out to kind of do some homework on this contractor. He seems like he's a new contractor doing some great things. And so we're excited to hopefully move forward with this project. Like I said, this one has been in the CIP for quite a while. That and Hillcrest, as you can tell, the streets, water mains. The water main is on the highest. It has 11 water main breaks as far back as I could find records. So we're there every year, sometimes if not two. So
the hard part for this project is because where we're at with a lot of projects, where they're coming in over estimates. And so, this isn't a drop in the bucket. This is over, the estimate was, or the bid came in 284, just to say 285,000 above the engineer's estimate. And so that will have to be absorbed through some other funds, more likely lost. Or some other funds within the water and sewer utility as they're applicable towards that, which the project is being split between water, sewer, and general fund through lost and road use tax to cover for this. So, but that's a big chunk of $285,000. The alternative, as Brandon pointed out, you have another water main break or you have another sewer main, you're going to be spending, if it was 58,000 4 or 5 years ago,
Yeah.
you're going to be spending $100,000 possibly today if we have to go out and do an emergency repair. Unfortunately, that's the bad news with where we're at with our infrastructure, as well as just the sign of the times with the bidding market right now for these projects.
I really couldn't get a good picture to show it, but if you drive out there, it's literally concrete patch asphalt. Just shows where we've been. I mean, if it's not every 20 feet, we're just continuing to dig and replace. So like Daniel said, whether it be the sanitary sewer, storm sewer, or the water main, we're constantly spending money out there. As well as patching the street just to get us by, so.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. Call for resolution finally approving and confirming plan specifications and formal contract estimate cost for Lincoln Drive reconstruction project and awarding contract with Doyle Construction in the amount of $1,376,376.50 and committing necessary funds to complete the project. So moved.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Item B is a public hearing on proposed plan specifications, proposed form contract and estimate of cost for Burn River concrete panel replacement. I'll open the hearing. Are there any written objections?
No written objections?
Are there any oral objections?
No oral objections?
I'll close the hearing.
Hi, Mayor and council members. So this item, you guys have seen it before. This was our second time going out for bid. We did receive 2 bids. One of them was from Pillar for $68,000. The other was from Woodruff Construction. They are the contracting firm that we utilize for the City Hall basement project. So we have previously worked with them. They came in at $41,785. We do have an outstanding balance with CDBG RLF that we have to spend down, and that's a little under $48,000. So they fall within that dollar amount. The only kicker here is that IEDA wants us to spend all of it. So we are going to have to work with IEDA to figure out what we do with that remaining $4,200-ish after Midas takes their administrative fee. But we are asking if we will be able to utilize city staff time to get reimbursed for some of those costs. So we're just asking council to award the contract to Woodruff Construction. They won't be back until the spring when the temperatures get warmer to do the work.
Move to approve.
Second.
The resolution approving and confirming plan specification, formal contract and estimate of cost for construction of the Boom River Trail panel replacement project and authorizing the mayor to sign an agreement with Woodruff Construction.
So moved.
Vincent?
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, D is the second reading of an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Webster City, Iowa, 2019 by amending Chapter 48 pertaining to sewer rental rates.
This is the second reading of the sewer rates that we've been discussing in conjunction with the new wastewater treatment plant. The second reading, there's no changes to the rates that were being proposed. Since the first reading, we have developed or we finally launched a web page that has information detailing out the project scope, the overall plans. We've also, I believe, should have gone live by now, a calculator of sorts that residents and customers can use to calculate that rough estimate of what their new sewer bill will cost. So that's gone live. So this is just a second reading. If there's any specific questions that BD and I can answer for you.
Thanks for doing that too. I see the links you sent and stuff. I appreciate you getting that on the website, and that's really cool.
Yeah, she was wondering whether
Anyone saw it?
Well, I know you're asking for feedback. I'll just tell you in person.
Wasn't looking at it, I was driving. Okay,
Just need a motion.
so call for a motion.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, TIF appropriations. Resolution regarding funds from the Urban Renewal TIF Revenue Fund for appropriation to payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations, which shall be due in the next succeeding fiscal year for Fairway. Daddy, did you want to chat on all these? That's okay.
We do the same ones every year.
Me too.
Already a new. There's not a new one, right? It's all the same.
No. No, I think. Call for motion.
They'll move.
All those in favour say aye. Aye. Item F is a resolution obligating funds from the Urban Renewal Tax Revenue Fund for appropriation to the payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations, which shall come due in the next succeeding fiscal year for Webster City Financial Bank and Webster City Sewer Fund.
Move to. Go ahead, Matt. Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Item G is a resolution obligating funds from Urban Renewal Tax Revenue Fund for appropriation to the payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations, which shall become due in the next succeeding fiscal year for 3DK Enterprises LLC.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Item H, resolution obligating funds from the Urban Renewal Tax Revenue Fund for appropriation to payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations, which shall come due in the next succeeding fiscal year for Ridge Development LLC and LMI Fund.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Item I, resolution obligating funds from the Urban Renewal Tax Revenue Fund for appropriation to the payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations, which will come due in the next succeeding fiscal year for Kenyon Ridge LLC and LMI Fund.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Item J is a resolution obligating funds from Urban Renewal Tax Revenue Fund for appropriation to payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations, which shall come due in the next succeeding fiscal year for Gary and Brenda Fox.
Move to approve.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
K is a resolution obligating funds from Urban Renewal Tax Revenue Fund for appropriation and payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations, which shall come due in the next succeeding year for First State Bank Edition number 2.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Okay. L is a resolution approving the official annual urban renewal report.
Move to approve.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
And then M is a resolution approving the official city street financial report.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Item N is a resolution to transfer cash from various funds to other various funds. That's always a big mistake one. Probably are various funds, various funds. And
Second.
all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Item O is a resolution authorising the city manager to execute change order number 1 to the contract with Woodruff Construction for the City Hall basement and floor reconstruction project, and authorising payment number 2 to Woodruff Construction.
So this change order is just a request for them to do some more joint sealing to prevent that water infiltration to the basement. The total amount is $3,805. And then we did also identify that payment number 2 hadn't been issued, so we're requesting authorization to issue that payment.
To approve.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
P, resolution amending previously adopted purchasing policies and procedures for the Webster City, Iowa.
Yep, so this is an item that I actually worked with our finance director on, and then I also worked with Allers and Cooney, a legal firm, who's had their specialist in procurement help me work through this. But some of the reasons we did this is there was some confusion on just some of the language, like we changed department head to department director and department supervisor so that it's a little more clear on who has what thresholds for approval. Some of the big changes is we included more definitions in the policies to make things more clear. We did request to modify city manager's authority to $24,999. I went through our municipal code, and in the administrative section, it does say that the city council authorizes any spending in excess of $25,000. And then I surveyed other communities to see what their city managers had authority to purchase. And Indianola is the only one that also has an electric utility, and theirs is authorized up to 25,000. Humboldt has the authority of 25,000 and then 50,000 for their budgeted items for their CIP. Mason City has 20,000. Marshalltown had 44,999. So we felt 25,000 was an appropriate and comfortable place that council may be comfortable with, especially because of what our code says. We also incorporated Iowa code sections into the procurement policy and then amended the threshold for purchases with city employees. Allers and Cooney did notify me that that threshold was updated in 2019. So we updated that to reflect current law. We incorporated the clause noting that federally funded projects must follow their procedures, and then we tied in the updated federal regulations as an appendix, which we already had. They had just been modified and updated since, so we just got those to be current. Some of the other things that we do is we use cooperative purchasing agreements, and our current policy didn't address that. So we just made that more clear. So when auditors are looking at our purchases, we can actually explain it and tie it back to a policy and procedure. We did tie in the sole source purchasing requirements. There are times when staff is looking to buy something and maybe it's a specialized item and only one person can produce it. So in lieu of having to really go through that process of identifying the 3 quotes, we tied in a sole source purchasing section that outlines when they're okay to do that. And that also helps us through our auditing process. For professional services, our current policy didn't really address professional services, so we just defined those more clearly in this policy. So the city council would approve any professional services agreements over 25,000, and the city manager would have authority for 24,999. We also incorporated a section on public improvements. That was also not completely clear in the original policy that we had. And then we also tied in the change order authority. And we did that because sometimes the change order is necessary, but if we have to come to council, it can delay a project, and that can increase the cost for the contractor if they have to mobilize twice, or if they have to tie up their working days at another project. We also tied in the utility exception clause, and this is a clause that the legal counsel advised we could tie in. So anything that is repair and maintenance on any infrastructure that's existing for all our utilities, like electric, water, sewer, those can actually be repaired without going through the Chapter 26 process. So this would alleviate some of the things that we're doing, like the CIPP lining or any water main valves. Those kinds of projects we would be able to proceed without going through that full-blown Chapter 26 process, and it would make everything a little more efficient. We did tie in a credit card policy, noting that credit cards are to primarily be used for travel and training. And if they are going to be used outside of that, they need prior authorization from finance director and the city manager. So that's another thing the auditors noted, was that we needed a little bit more tighter controls on our credit card policy. And that's also tied into the store credit policy. And then we also created acknowledgement forms so that staff is signing these off when they, if you guys approve this tonight, we'll go through a training process with all of our staff. They'll acknowledge they receive the policies and that they understand them and they agree to abide by them.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay. Item Q. Council memorandum resolution providing for notice of hearing to commence a public improvement project to construct the Fair Meadow Drive widening and reconstruction project and to acquire property for the project for December 19 at 6:05 PM.
So the Fair Meadow project has come before you guys a couple times already. This is a hearing of necessity that we just need to do to go through the steps needed to acquire easements in any right of way that we're gonna need to widen the road. So this is just one of the steps in the process. In the event that one of the property owners doesn't really want to grant us easements or right of way, this gives us that security that we could go through the more the eminent domain process and negotiate with property owners on getting that right of way acquired. So I'm asking that the council set the hearing date for December 19th, and then we'll be issuing notice to property owners and publishing this in the paper.
Move to approve.
Again.
All those in favour say aye. Aye. Item R is a resolution authorising the mayor to sign and execute amendment number 21 with Snyder and Associates to provide additional professional services needed for the 2023 water main repair project.
So this is pretty routine. We've worked with Snyder and Associates on this before. What this is to proceed with starting to get some plans and specs going for water main valves and fire hydrants. Currently, we have 475 inline valves and over 1330 fire hydrants. So they're all in working condition. However, you're seeing a lot of Iowa hydrants, that were in the 60s, 70s and 80s that they're still operable, but they're at the end of their lifespan. They're very hard to operate. Once you get out there, we're having issues with that. Bleeding back in the winter. When you see us out flushing hydrants, once they flow water and you shut it off, there's weepers at the bottom of the water, has to drain. It's not actually just live to the top like everybody thinks. So those are the things we look for, and we need to stay ahead of the game and making sure we're continuing to replace those and staying ahead of the game. And the same thing with the valves. Valves are very important in isolation for projects throughout town, and also whether it be an emergency such as a water main break. Biggest thing for us is we want to isolate the water that is the water where we're at. We want to isolate it as small as possible, which that means less homes affected, less water being stirred up. And it's not as bad in the summer to get a little bit wet. But when it gets to these cold years or cold parts of the year, if we can't get it shut all the way down because the valves that just don't work, it makes tough conditions. So, and more homes were affected with people shut off with water, and that's not what we want to do. So we have 9 water main valves and 8 fire hydrants that we would like to get replaced. I believe for $250,000 we have budgeted. So any questions?
All right. Call for motion.
Move to approve. Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Item S. Resolution authorising the mayor to sign and execute amendment number 22 with Snyder and Associates to provide additional professional services needed for the water system study.
Hey, so this is part of the objective of meeting the goal to develop the strategic plan for our aging infrastructure replacement. This particular amendment would create a water hydraulic system and would analyze our existing water distribution system. So what that means is they'll take our system, they'll model it, and then as we get new development, they'll be able to plug that development in and tell us if we have capacity to serve them based on existing infrastructure, or if we need to upsize any of that infrastructure, as well as identify any of the issues around town, if we have any bottlenecks or if we have any lines that need to be upsized. And it can help us identify what our pressures look like throughout town and where we need to make some of these improvements. So this particular study is estimated to be $50,500. It's not in this fiscal year's budget, but the work is not slated to commence until July 1 of 2023. So we are planning on putting this into the next fiscal year's budget. We just wanted to make sure that you guys were still on board with getting some of this work done.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Item T is a resolution authorising the mayor to sign and execute amendment number 23 with Snyder and Associates to provide additional professional services needed for stormwater system study.
So this one would do the same thing, except it would do that with our stormwater conveyance system, and then it would analyze how we're currently draining throughout the community. It would identify areas that are not at adequate capacity to take flows if we had private development come in and what needs to be done as well. And then also make recommendations and identify areas that need repairs so that we can plan for them accordingly. This particular study is estimated to cost about $215,000. So this one's a little bit more robust. We'll get the written report and we'll also get the hydraulic model of the entire city. But this is more analyzing watersheds, analyzing drainage patterns, grades, all that. So it's a little bit more intensive when they're looking at it. Requires a lot more work.
I was wondering why they're that much more expensive. So, okay.
What do we gain from that? Like, what-
So we gain knowledge. So say a developer wants to come in and they want to build 60 homes in a particular area. When they come in, if we don't understand how that area is laid out and what kind of drainage is necessary, we can't make an informed decision for them to build out that particular subdivision. And I've seen in previous communities, if you don't make that informed decision, then that subdivision can then have issues with that stormwater and the infrastructure. And once we've accepted it, it becomes our issue and we have to resolve that for the residents. So these kinds of studies are they're really great tools for staff to have as we're going through the new development process, as we're planning for long range infrastructure repairs. It's very clear where the issues are and we know exactly where to go to take care of everything.
No, awesome. I was just curious, kind of like the definition of that data or maybe metadata to the point of like, we can kind of really see some trends, some spots or whatever for water runoff.
Yep.
No, very good. And that was not a gotcha question. I was really just curious, like, what are we gaining?
Yeah, and sometimes the hard part with the storm sewer in particular is the issues may not be immediate to those immediate area. It could be downstream from where they were. So.
Sure.
And they're more expensive to start and develop because once you have it, you just maintain it.
Second.
Favor aye. Item U, discuss and review the 6-month process 2022 city council goal setting report.
Okay, so this is just going to go through a report of our current progress as it relates to the goals and objectives that were developed by yourselves at the work session back in April. I do have a couple on here that are, is this on? Am I supposed to point at your computer?
The switch on the side on? Turn off, turn on.
Our goals to get.
You're pressing the laser. I don't know which one you're pressing.
Oh, which one am I supposed to press? This one?
Right.
No, that's the laser.
We have the hardest time with technology.
We can't have nice things. Jesus, we could do it, working.
Test it out for you.
Yeah, I'll build another one. You want to buy one of these? I have the same problem at home all the time. Which one do you do?
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Okay.
I'm just going to start with some additional initiatives that have kind of been added on since we developed the scope. Riser substation, that's the substation that we're going to be using to replace past waters, and that came to light after we started doing our review of the force main. And DGR was completing their analysis of our current system. So what we've done so far is you guys approved the power transformer to be ordered. So we've done that. We've identified a location, and then DGR is working on the preliminary engineering and design for this project. The speed cameras, we've been gathering more information to bring back to city council, and that's something you guys discussed at the last meeting. For the water treatment, given the age of the current plant that we have, the lack of redundancy, because we only have one clarifier and we have to go down for maintenance every year. And the new regulations that are likely going to come forward, like PFAS, we're working on evaluating what renovations or whether or not we need to construct a new water treatment plant right now, including the thought of reverse osmosis for that plant. And then for Wilson Brewer Historic Park, tonight you guys will review the recommendation from the park committees. Next.
Also, this is not the comprehensive. I mean, these are just the major initiatives that since April have come up. There's obviously a lot of little other initiatives that kind of come up and take staff time and resources. Things that are unknown, such as the building collapse and other things that tie up staff and other resources during that. So.
Yep. So I'm just going to go through the goals in order of the report. But one of the programs, policies, and initiatives that were identified as given, like these have to happen, was the lead service line inventory and establishing a replacement plan. So this is something that's mandated by the EPA, so we have no choice. We have to do this by October of 2024. So currently the IDNR and the EPA both released guidance. EPA put out some guidance before DNR, but DNR recently put that out and staff has watched the webinars. So we're currently working on identifying the best method to approach this and what type of budget that's going to look like. So you guys will see this in the next budget so that we can proceed with working on getting that put together. Number 2, I can mark that complete because you guys just approved the policy for the credit card. And then number 3, completion of updating employee job descriptions. Those are currently up to date. Additional updates could be necessary. And then as people retire and things start to change and shift, those are revisited and updated prior to being flown.
I want to point out with the lead service line, I mean, that process is going to be very complex and trying to obtain specific information in other communities and other states where this has gone in, and especially Wisconsin is probably the best example where they've had to pothole and suck out the dirt to identify where all those lead service lines are. And eventually, this isn't just a matter of identifying and having an inventory list. Cities are going to be mandated to replace or require residents to replace those lead service lines. And so it's going to be a considerable cost that's going to come down the pipeline.
Yep. And that's part of the establishment of the replacement plan. At some point, we'll be coming back to you as a council to help us decide if it's going to be put on property owner cost share, or if the city will absorb that cost. And then goal number 4 was completion of an incentive program for water and wastewater operators, licenses above a minimum grade. So that was completed. There was an incentive tied in for operators who have above the grade per grade that they have. So that's been done. Number 5, updating our zoning code as needed. So we did recently hire the community development director in June of 2022. She's been reviewing zoning code and she is going to be working with the Planning and Zoning Commission. She did ask them how they would prefer to approach that, and they just wanted to go based off of recommendations and any priorities that she's identified and then piecemeal it that way. Updated emergency plans. So you guys did just approve and update the local hazard mitigation plan to incorporate our wastewater treatment plant and our water plant because they are so close to the flood zones. So we've done that as well. There's been a grant that was submitted for backup power for the sewer lift stations. We've not heard back. When you apply for FEMA grants, it can take up to a year before they get back to you. And then we are actively making efforts to update our emergency contingency plans per department. So those are still ongoing initiatives. Number 7, the explore creation of emergency backup location for police dispatching. That includes both the radio communication and telephone functionality. So the radio portion has been completed. Staff is working on identifying how the telephone communication is going to be rerouted in the event that we were to go down during a disaster or a tornado. So that's still something they're working on. Number 8, ensure all emergency services are being met within the community of Webster City. This is another ongoing initiative. As staff identifies things that are needed, they're going to be bringing them to you. One of them was the 3 new police vehicles that you guys just approved that will continue police efforts to serve the community. They've also been working on establishing partnerships with local businesses, service organizations, and the schools. ADA transition plan, this was a plan that you guys recently approved. The original agreement was that this would be updated and done by March. However, the project manager we were assigned, he became ill, so there will be about a 2-month delay on this. So we'll get it in May of 2023. But they're currently in the process of doing the building assessments. So they're analyzing how friendly our buildings are for that, for the report. And then number 10, we completed that tonight. To go back. So ADA transition plan was on there twice as part of the given goals. But number 2 was the wastewater treatment plant. That one, you guys recently approved for us to proceed with pursuing the state revolving loan fund. So that's where we're at. We're still actively working with trying to acquire the easements that are needed for the force main route as well. And then we've just completed the website that just launched today. For initiatives and programs, one of the things that you guys identified was that we needed to have staff development objectives. So standard operating procedures, plan for future retirements, and reorganize city departments and staff to better fit the needs of the city. So the department heads have been developing standard operating procedures, and they're actively working on those things as they have time. So we don't have all of them laid out yet, but we're still working on those. We've identified upcoming retirements, and we're planning accordingly by trying to create some redundancy amongst staff so that others are learning what the institutional knowledge that is going to be leaving us in the next 5 to 7 years. And then the reorganization is happening as openings occur based on operational needs as well. Number 2 is develop a strategic plan on how to address the replacement of aging infrastructure. Tonight, you guys approved 2 amendments that are going to really help us do that. The reason we didn't pursue a sewer system study at this time is because we want to wait until the wastewater plant has been done and we know exactly what needs to happen in the conveyance system after that. The electric system study, they've done a preliminary conclusion on that one, and we'll be bringing that to council at a future date. The pavement condition street study was presented to council back in October of 2021. So you guys have already seen that, and that is what Brandon utilizes as he's planning the capital improvement plan. The other part is once all of this is identified, we're going to have to really work on our budget priorities in the ranking system. Daniel's going to talk about that in a future item, but that is going to be an initiative that'll be a little difficult as we're working and navigating through all of these expensive capital improvement projects. Another goal is training and development of staff. So city leadership team, we did just participate in a week-long training on the week of October 24th. And then as part of the succession planning, we are going to be doing a second round. So the next round of and group of leaders is going to be going through that same training that we just went through next year in October. And then, of course, we continue to share our standard operating procedures with all of the staff that's been coming on board. Number 4, this one we need a little bit more guidance on from you guys. This has not been started. So if you guys could give us some direction on this one as far as how soon do you want to see it done? What are you looking for us to do with this one?
I think the discussion was the frustration with the recycling and the lack of, items they take. And
The containers they're in.
then the containers they use here.
So when this is bid out, you guys want to see it bid out in a manner where we have closed lid containers?
And more types of recycling. I understand could come with a higher cost. That's something I wanted to see and we can weigh out if that's a service we want to provide to our city. Because I know that some like certain cardboards are more high, high value to get rid of. They could set more seats up. I understand there might be costs associated, but. What I understood, we're gonna get some information on kind of what recycling could look like, what that cost would be, and we'd make an informed decision on how we wanted to go. If we want to keep it the way it is, tweak it slightly or ramp it way up.
That one should be relatively easy. I know it's surrounding communities that's much smaller than what city already have large enclosed containers, and it's the same companies that are doing ours currently, so.
Did they go through like a formal RFP process?
Mhm.
Okay. And then the advanced metering infrastructure, that RFQ has been finalized. I was talking to our electric supervisor about this, and we feel like that it would be better to just wait till after the holidays, so we make sure we get some good bids and proposals submitted. But that is still in the works. That one's just been a little complicated because there's professional services and contractor services tied in. So I did recently have legal opinion on that one, and then Zach helped me with developing the service contract for that one as well. So that one's pretty well ready to go. You'll be seeing that one fairly soon, requesting authorization to bid. And then number 2, we do need more guidance on that one as far as when do you guys want to see it? Because as we're working on the CIP, we would like to build in what the expectation is there. Daniel has a little bit more background than me on the history of that connection and what the holdup is, but
Yeah, and that one we could probably, as we go through the budget process, talk about it a little more in detail. One of the key holdups to that was the right of way for the railroad or the bridge across the creek there. The right of way on the east side was relinquished by the county, and so that was going to be a major crossing and access to coming on park. Now that kind of changes the route we go with. So this one is probably an item that needs to be considered by council as part of the overall budget process to determine where you want to allocate your priorities and your funding sources for.
so we'll wait for budget process. Okay. Number 3, that one's ongoing. You guys see that in the 5-year CIP, and then we come to you when we need authorization to bid the projects for the street and the road replacement plans. We did get a grant from Iowa DOT for a TEEP study, which is a technical engineering assistance program. They concluded their safe routes to school study, and I'll be bringing that to council as an info item so that you guys can go through it as well at a future meeting. But for now, I have shared it with the school superintendent and the staff, like our police chief and our street supervisor. And then number 4 is the splash pad. So our staff did complete their research. And depending on the type of splash pad you guys want to see, the size of the splash pad, council could be looking at costs ranging from $400,000 to $850,000. So do you want to wait for budget time for this one as well? Or do we want to hear now like what the thought process is and what you guys would like to see?
Yeah, we can probably, if you want, wait for the budget process. Otherwise, we can agendize this at either the next one or the one thereafter to kind of dive into a little more detail. Given that this is, I know, an item in the community that people have a lot of interest in. So it might be more beneficial for the public's interest to have that as a standalone agenda item.
And I think it needs to be considered in conjunction with the discussion on whether, where, when and if. It's really cool. I mean, I think you need to talk about it all together.
I agree.
So do you want it as a separate agenda item at a future meeting, or do you want to wait till budget process?
Future. This budget process.
Well, we're going to start on some of the conversations earlier on than we did in the past, which we'll touch on in the subsequent agenda item. But so we can, let's just plan on agendizing something. So we start the conversation of where you guys want to head, probably no later in the second meeting in December, if that's okay with everyone.
Okay. And those are pretty much the goals that were identified in the council goal setting session and everything that we've been working on towards meeting those goals.
Thanks for the update.
Item B is a resolution authorizing the mayor to authorize sign enhanced Hamilton County grant application fiscal sponsorship requests.
So I attended the Enhanced Hamilton County Foundation grant training. And part of that training is if you're going to apply for the grant, you have to attend the training. But one of the things that was mentioned there is that if you require a fiscal sponsor, which would be organizations like SMID and the Chamber, because they are nonprofits, but they don't have that 501c3 designation. They'll have like a 501c6 or just a business type designation. So they wouldn't qualify to apply for the grant themselves and have that money dispersed directly to them. So one of the options that Enhanced Hamilton County has is called a fiscal sponsorship. So what that means is that if an organization were to find a fiscal sponsor, in this case, the city, we would sign that fiscal sponsorship form, agreeing to just basically pass that check on to the organization. So the chamber does actively look for grants. I know right now they're really trying to enhance their activities guide and make that a little bit more robust and add a digital component. And then the SMID group, they're actively looking for money for new banners, landscaping. They want to finish the mural that they started. So I thought it would be a good idea to bring this to you guys to make a decision as to whether you'd be open to allowing the mayor to decide what would be appropriate to be a sponsor for these organizations.
Second.
All those in favour say aye. Item W is a resolution authorising the city information director to purchase 2 new GTAC rugged laptops.
This is a request from the IT department to purchase 2 puff books, as sometimes they're also referred to. The name varies by the brand, but because the total purchase exceeds the $10,000 per our old procurement code, council still has to approve it.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Item X, a request from the Chamber of Commerce to close the following streets on Saturday, December 3rd for the Christmas and the City Parade from 4 to 6 p.m. We got Seneca Street between Bank and 2nd, alley access blocked, and 2nd Street from Seneca to Prospect, intersection closure at Prospect and 2nd.
Move to approve. Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Item Y is a discussion and direction to staff on City Council request for information regarding automated traffic enforcement system, speed and red light. Yeah.
This is a follow-up discussion from the last meeting regarding speed cameras before Webster City limits. So there's a couple of questions that were asked. One of them was the potential for conducting studies of specific locations in the community to determine, one, what type of traffic volume, as well as how many speeders are occurring to that specific location. I know that we had reached out to Snyder Associates to get an estimate on what a warrant analysis or a traffic study would cost per location. So ballparking, you'd be starting off about $2,500 and adding an additional $500 per each location. There's additional costs associated if you were to do anything like on a county or on a state primary road. So Highway 20, Highway 17 may have some additional costs. And you'd want to try to do them. That additional $500 is if you do them all at the same time. So to reduce the mobilization costs. And so you would get a 24-hour sample period and then do the analysis based off of that. So I think, as I mentioned in the prior meeting, with some of the vendors, depending if you go with sole source or you actually bid it out, that function of doing the assessments as well as a little bit broader and looking at the infrastructure that would be required for each site would be evaluated as part of their due diligence and that assessment. And then that just goes to validate one, whether you do, essentially, we do have a speeding problem at that location, as well as the impact that speed camera could potentially have in that particular location. Additionally, we looked at potential sites based off of where the last council meeting included a list of the speeding citations for the last 24 months approximately. And looking at the main locations of potential sites where one could go in. Highway 20 seems to be the most ideal location, and one that's because of the speed you see there, as well as the hazard that are potential with having an officer patrol that. You take that officer away, you replace him with a speed camera that just enhances that officer safety. We also 2nd Street on the east side, so between High Street and approaching Mary Ann's and Webster City Custom Meats. Third location, I'm sorry, 2nd Street was second one was Brigham Woods, Highway 17. Third one was 2nd Street East Side. Fourth one was James Street out by McKinley Cancer. The other one is White Fox Road, north of the railroad tracks before the city limits. Beach Street is another one where we have quite a bit of concerns at times south of Ohio. Ohio Street is one that I think a lot of you guys also from time to time get concerns or residents complaints about. So those are some potential locations that would probably, if you move forward, should be considered as part of those assessments. And then there was questions or costs or questions regarding the cost and revenue that may be generated. I want to reiterate the intention of this is really public safety driven to promote safety and driver awareness on city roads in particular and speed limits and get compliance with that. That being said, in many occasions in many of the cities, you do get a lot of speeders, and so you're bound to generate revenue based off of whatever threshold you set that. In many cities, it's roughly about 10 or 11 miles above the speed limit that speeders get cited and ticketed for. And just to reiterate also, the speed cameras would require an officer review of the data collected and the photographic evidence and before the citation could be issued. And the citation is issued under municipal code or municipal infraction and not against the state code that would trigger a point against someone's driving record. And so we looked at, or at least I looked at, the Iowa DOT publishes information on average annual daily traffic volumes. The last time they did this was in 2019. So that was helpful because it was before COVID. So if we had any recent numbers, we would be dealing with COVID reduced numbers. So you see Highway 20 has approximately between 10 and 11,300 vehicles per day. Highway 17 between 3,700 and 6,100. Superior Street, surprisingly, I was expecting Highway 17 to be more, but you see that breakdown between Highway 20 and Fair Meadow Drive. Then you have Fair Meadow to Edgewood Drive, and then you have Ohio Street to Webster Street. So some pretty high numbers in comparison to Highway 17. 2nd Street, High Street between County Road 35, like I mentioned, that's between High Street and Custom Meats, essentially 2,800 vehicles. James Street, 220th Street, a little over 3,000, and White Fox at 1,300. So comparing, just looking at basic information available, a lot of the financial information is their revenues commingled into the broader general fund revenue. So it's hard to decipher what they truly generate unless they specifically call it out or there's some other information. So LeClaire is probably the most newest example and somewhat comparable, although their traffic volumes are drastically more. So if you want to extrapolate 33,000 versus 11,000, you can just take that percentage as a potential estimate. But off of 3 cameras, two systems which are fixed, one on Interstate 80, one on Highway 67, and then a third one's a mobile unit. But the first year of implementation of their operation brought in $2.2 million for their city. Prairie City has 1 stationary trailer and 2 handheld units, with the stationary trailer on Highway 163. And they didn't specify what their revenues were bringing in, but recent public hearing, public comments back in the summer, they were talking about projects and where some of the revenue can go towards. So looking at that, you would determine that they have a significant amount of revenue coming in if they're thinking about funding a fire station, a new public works building, new library, or other capital projects in the city. And so Sioux City, two mobile units on Interstate 29, as well as speed cameras have been in use since 2013. And since that time, they brought in about $22 million. And that's gone everything. I know there was the topic brought up of using it specifically for public safety at the last meeting. They've really kind of, I think, emphasized that a little bit more, and they've gone towards public safety. It's going to replace vehicles, equipment, police and fire, as well as streets, lights, pretty much anything that can fall within public safety. I didn't list it on here, but Waterloo had a similar emphasis on their speed cameras going towards public safety items as well. And so I would recommend, because this a bit of the unknown of if you move forward, what type of revenue may be coming in, or whether that revenue would decrease or diminish in the long term. So I would recommend not letting it go toward operating funds in the event that the cameras or the revenue will go away. I'm drawing that based on just my experience in Arizona, where the state had implemented speed cameras, and then after several years they did away with them, and then the state had to figure out how to make those budget reductions that had gone into operational funds. And so by pledging it to one-time expenses, so capital projects, equipment, you kind of help reduce the issues that arise when you start commingling with operational funds. And so I would recommend, I think we mentioned last time that to move forward, it would entail updating our municipal code to include a section to allow for the speed cameras. And the time frame from start to finish till the cameras go live could be about 6 months. A little more if we're gonna be dealing with Highway 20 and some of the requirements that the DOT will require on that. So if you decide you want to move forward and you want to get this in operation as quickly as possible, I would recommend that we do a sole source contract. If time is not an essence, so we can proceed with doing an RFP and requesting proposals. I will say in recent months, in the past recent years, one vendor had been predominant in obtaining the contracts for a number of cities in the state. And so they pretty much have a good grasp as well as presence in Iowa to be able to operate. So based on their experience, and that might be one option we go towards if you want to expedience is an issue to try to get this on live as soon as possible. So. And then any other questions regarding if any locations outside of those presented would be locations you'd want to proceed. I know I mentioned looking at the traffic map that the Iowa DOT had puts out. Broadway had a significant number of accidents, particularly when you look close at the map. A lot of them were at or near intersections that have controlled stop signs as they cross. I would assume as they cross the east-west traffic, you just have drivers that are driving too excessive for the speed for the area, or failing to yield to the cars as they come down north south on Broadway. So, any questions that Shiloh and I can ask or answer for you, not ask?
So you're looking for guidance then to whether we want to go to a single source or sole source?
Well, I think first, if you even want to continue with proceeding, and then the second question, yes, if it's you prefer sole source or we're getting proposals. And third question, if the locations that are identified are adequate, or if you want to limit those or add one.
I'm on the fence, honestly. I think I mentioned at the last meeting, I'd really love to see it be a focus on safety and improving safety. The idea of not having to have a patrolman on Highway 20, that is definitely a safety improvement. I know where I go through where there's speed cameras, it slows me down. And not that I'm crazy driver, but I do go slower. So from that perspective, it does slow people down, which inherently will be safer which in the long run. But they're not the most popular things in the world, obviously. I'm a little bit on the fence about whether to proceed forward or not.
Yeah, I made my opinion known before we got to this stage that, I don't like the idea of Big Brother, autonomously logging speed. And I can't really argue with revenue numbers, we obviously gotta start getting creative here. Pulling more revenue in. So, and of course, safety, I don't wanna like not say it's good safety. But the safety benefits and the revenue benefits are appealing. It just kind of goes against what I feel comfortable with. For any type of violations. I'm open to it. I think it could do a lot for other safety amenities in Webster City. Funding our fire and police departments, and as well as just other things I'm not even thinking off the top of my head, so. I'm not opposed to it. I don't know if I'm in the same position you are, Matt, but I kind of have a weird feeling about it, but I can't argue with the revenue and the safety benefits.
Yes.
What do you think, Joan?
Well, I'm happy to move forward with it. If the safety part of it works, it's, I know I slow down when I know there's cameras, but maybe they only slow down when there's cameras. But, so that, and obviously not having a car on the highway, works. Just having a camera there really does work well, because, just having an officer pulling someone up on the side of the highway can cause an accident by itself, let alone the fact that he's got to be out there too. So, it's an extra man you'll have in the police department in a lot of ways, so, without actually having to pay for him. So
I was gonna ask about that. So like, they mentioned that there might be an extra officer to help process these and like sign off on them, validate them, if you will. So like.
But he doesn't have to be at risk out there doing anything.
No, right, and he or she could do other things. Based on the volume of this load, right? So it could be another patrol person, other, relief of other patrol members. I'm not opposed to adding another police officer at all. I'm just like this isn't their sole duty though, would it? Unless it just became overwhelming, they'd be able to.
Like a shared duty.
Yeah, once we kind of. Really, and until we get into it, we know how much burden it would be time wise. So it would just kind of depend if they're hours a day they have as few calls or evening time, or if someone is on light duty. That's one of the issues. It's for me, a police officer, it's very difficult if you have someone who is on light duty to have them do anything. So that'd be one side possibly.
Couple of things I also like to throw out there is like, if we did move forward on this, like I always appreciate like the news in the morning. I'm drinking my coffee, reading the newspaper, like they go, oh, speed camera on 35 and 80, whatever. It's so
It's movable, right?
it's movable.
We haven't decided.
Yeah, you haven't decided, but yeah,
It's movable.
Des Moines does that.
Say it's not movable, then it's a mute point. Everyone's gonna figure out where it's at. But if it is a mobile unit and it is moved, I would like to let the community know that we're moving it and it's going to be moved before it is. I don't want to be a trap. I want to be a safety deterrent. And I want to be, hey, we see speeds in excess in this corner. That's why we're putting it there to make that corner safer. So being upfront about it takes away that kind of icky big brother feeling I have with it. So I would like to be proactive of letting the community know where it's going to be and when, rather than make it like a trap.
I think we're better off having a fixed.
If it's fixed, it's fixed, yeah.
Than having a mobile basis, so yeah.
I know other communities, when they've implemented some of these systems, they're not live, or they're live, but they're not issuing citations for 1 and 3 month period to get people accustomed to his presence.
Chief, how do you feel about it? Okay.
Stretch the legs.
I guess if the focus is safety, I'm not opposed to it. If it's strictly being motivated by a money grab, I don't like them. So I think it needs to be approached the right way. I do agree with, hypothetically, you put one on Highway 20, I don't have to risk an officer's life being out there. During the winter, we're out there enough as it is, and it's terrifying. when a semi flies past you doing who knows how fast on the ice.
He does.
I wasn't gonna point them out, but yeah.
Well, don't you guys have radar guns? Can you say, who knows, no, right? I'm just saying, John.
It is a safety issue for the officers where I can see where it would be beneficial.
I mean, anytime they don't have to be out there, good.
Right.
Well, I would recommend that there's a sole source that's most common in Iowa, correct? So let's reach out, and I would like a presentation for them to present. Here's what we've seen as the benefits outside of just financial.
I'm down with that.
That was your motion.
Thanks, Chief.
A motion to,
Your presentation from.
from a sole source provider.
Mhm.
Okay.
You need a. You don't need a.
Wait a second. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I will reach out and try to set up
Discussion, but
an item for the next meeting or two.
okay, Z is the discussion on fiscal year 2023-2024 budget development process overview and city council budget priorities and reductions ranking system.
So we've talked a little bit, and I think even before I came back, had a chance to visit with the council and thereafter about just our budget projections for the next several years. And some of the concerns I had back then and still have today, and they may get worse over time just based on what the legislature has done in the past recent years, that impact our general fund, and how much revenue we can generate. And so as we've talked about, also mentioned earlier, these projects, these capital projects, the equipment, they're not getting any cheaper. And so we're going to be straining to be able to meet the needs for our general funded departments, for capital projects, for their equipment, for at some point it's going to be payroll as well. And so as we approach the budget process, I want to be very mindful and deliberate and raising the alarm that it may not be in the short-term picture, but in the long-term picture, we need to change what we prioritize and what we're going to fund. And I'll be as bold as saying is that we're going to have to work strategically and say no to some items, because in the long-term, long-range picture, if you don't have some additional revenues to infuse the general fund, we're not going to be able to fund them. I think one projection based off of the budget reconciliation that was completed at the end of the fiscal year, or the adoption of the fiscal year 22-23 budget, the general fund reconciliation forecasted that we would lose about 60% of our general fund balance within the next 5 to 7 years. And so that's a significant amount. And so in talking after we had our goal setting workshop, followed up with Pat Callahan on just talking about our financial picture and looking at it. And he provided me an example of what he has introduced and helped other cities navigate similar situations we'd be in, and just adopting your ranking systems for our priorities. Now, we're not going to go through this now. I just wanted to introduce it. So over the next several meetings, you kind of start developing this thought process in your minds of how, what as staff is going to be looking for guidance and direction on some of the key items. We're going to try to put together and break down some of the key expenses, key projects, or all the projects really, and equipments. And so we're going to ask of you to identify and rank those priorities and those items on a first, second, third, and fourth choice, with each one having an applicable, acceptable with some concerns. Would consider, but have major concerns that would require additional information or research, or you just flat out not even consider it. So
These are cuts.
those could be cuts. Those could be projects that are being proposed that we just can't afford. So I mean, for instance, the aquatics center at the $12 million project, $12 million price tag You know, that may be a B, C, or D option in some cases. So, but just making sure that one, we've clearly identified whether it's something we can afford, council has a desire to move forward in the future, or we just need to not consider it at all, so that it doesn't stay on our CIP list or our goal settings list. So, but some of the key things that's going to impact our general fund is the cost of doing business. I mean, we've seen inflation, what's that has done. We all see it personally by the price of gas and how much that much more is. And all of our equipment and vehicles use gas and diesel, and that is probably not going to see any laxing here in the next few months or several years. So the cost of wages for employees as we see retirements occur, or as we lose employees, having to backfill those, what's the cost to employ that person, benefits, as well as whether or not we need to increase our wages to be more competitive. I mean, unfortunately, we're somewhat fortunate that we are close enough to Fort Dodge, Ames, Ankeny, and Des Moines, that we have the ability to visit there or go there for medical services or recreation, or just to get out of town for a day. But it's also close enough that people choose to work there because they can pay more. And so that's a factor in terms of whether we have the financial resources to employ the people that we do, and at what credentials they may have, or whether we have more flexibility to attract a larger pool from a wider area. You know, as we've recruited operators for street department, wastewater, water, line department, how close they live to town has been a factor. We've had to adjust our response time accordingly, because unfortunately, in some cases, at the cost at what we are paying new employees and the cost for new homes, if they're available in town, they just can't afford to live in town. So we either let them go, or we agree to employ them, even though they may have a slightly longer response time in the event of power outages or water main break or things of that nature. But legislatively, that's probably the biggest concern of what may happen. There's been changes over the last few years with the property tax rollbacks, in which they've changed the formula in which that alters how much money we actually collect on property taxes. In 2013, when they adjusted that, there was a promise, for lack of a better word, from the state legislature that the state would backfill the difference that we would lose. Well, over the next several years, and then more recently, that guarantee of that backfill coming in has been reduced and eventually is going to go away by 2028, 2029. There's no guarantee that we will receive a backfill. Based on the changes that have occurred in the last year, the difference between the property tax rollback and what the city would receive in backfill is a difference between almost $201,000 versus $177,000 that we would receive. So that loss of $33,000 has to come from somewhere, or it's just we see our fund balance diminish over time. And so these $33,000 in hindsight of our $4 to $7 million general fund, depending on what projects are being funded, it might be a small drop in the bucket, but there are a lot of these little instances that add up over the course of preparing the budget and have a huge impact on top of just trying to fund projects, equipment, and pay salaries to remain competitive and be able to fill positions when we have retirements or have openings that occurred. So, like I said, why don't you just start thinking about this ranking system? You have information in your packet that kind of Dodie put together that breaks down the different departments or the key services of what goes into supporting them. And as we go through the budget process, and I'm hoping to start probably by no later in the second meeting in December to start having some information for you and have you go through this exercise for some of the key priorities, initiatives, and projects so that we can start as staff start putting together the budget in a meaningful manner. Any questions or thought on this?
It's gonna be like a work session, or we're gonna do it like right here under quickly, or?
Well, we'll kind of depend how much information we need to throw at you.
Okay.
So it'll just kind of depend on, I don't think we're gonna have an extensive list of agenda items like tonight. but
Well, I didn't like when we were on the spot that one time.
We got done, but I like to think a little bit more than that.
Okay, item AA is discussion on hotel motel tax ordinance. Or hotel motel ordinance.
this was an item that came up. Council adopted the change to the ordinance to provide for the first 25% of revenue that's collected from hotel motel tax would go towards capital projects or improvements within park and recreation. There's been a couple committees and members on those committees that have raised this question of whether or not the funds would go towards operations specifically within parks and recreation, or more specifically to specific areas within parks and recreation. So there seems to be, I guess, that understanding, but the code is very explicit in terms of the way it was written and what it specifically said, that it would go towards capital improvements and projects. And I don't know if that intent was up to word it this way was because of all the projects and playground equipment that had to be upgraded and other needs within parks and recreation, capital improvement needs specifically, that this was specified, and I wasn't here at the time to decipher what the intent was. So I wanted to raise this if it's something that the council wants to modify to allow for hotel motel tax to go towards operational funds, how specific you want to get, because that's going to have an impact in our capital improvement list that we start generating and are starting to work on with Parks and Rec.
Well, I don't think that the hotel motel tax should just necessarily, like you put down that you've got a list of projects that they want. I think the hotel motel tax should have been spent yearly. It shouldn't be just kept there saved up from year to year until you get $300,000 so you can buy something. The original intent for this 25% was that was the original intent for the hotel motel tax that they were putting in for each year was for Wilson Brook Park, because that's all that we're doing with that money. It was running the Wilson Brook Park. So that's, and that, to say that we're going to now use it and just save it up each year is sort of takes away from the hotel motel tax thing. If that's the case, then we should be just budgeting for those projects directly, not relying on hotel motel tax to pay for everything.
Say something. We do budget for them, but just like, we have to make cuts every year, and that is what's getting cut is the Parks and Rec.
I was gonna say, that was my recollection of the 25%, and why we put it in that way is because that's exactly right. What was happening is every time it would come up for a budget, the cities, you guys would always cut, not you guys, council in general, not picking on you guys, would constantly cut the Parks and Rec budget. That was always the easy one to cut. And I remember there'd always been discussions, and then when East Twin came up and Nokoma's, West Twin somewhat, and now Kendall Young has been brought up, this Kendall Young Trail, those were never going to be funded or were always being the ones that were cut. That's why the 25 was put in for capital projects improvements, and Wilson Brewer Park was included in that discussion, obviously, as well, because there's major projects. But I remember that's why that came up. That 25% was because we were constantly cities was just never funding it. I mean, they were always cutting that out of the deal.
But that fund was specifically asked for the running of Wilson Brook Park at the time.
See, I don't recall it. I recall it being budgeted.
It was. Kent, Kent would apply for the grant through the hotel motel process, and it was the depot expenses is what he would use and get reimbursed. However, I felt like I'm with Zach, I felt like it was more because we were not able to keep up with the Parks and Rec requests. That's what was getting, we have our budget, but we have to make huge cuts. And unfortunately, seemed to be, he would take one for the team, so to speak. And so that's why I actually made a sub fund up the general fund to track that money so that we could definitely say, okay, this is, where it's being spent. But you do what you want, but that's my take on it.
But that was the original, why he was originally.
That's what he was originally doing, yes.
Because I believe this happened around the same time you know, the beautification project, the Wilson Brewer. And some of the amenities that are gonna be added and how they're gonna fund these. And I remember early on, you know, before Kent's passing, you know, we talked about how we're gonna, you know, we barely fund it as is, and yeah, he did always apply for Wilson Brewer through the hotel motel. So yeah, I kind of saw it too, that we just give it to the Parks and Rec, but it was basically just a given to fund Wilson Brewer. Through my understanding, I'm not saying that was deemed, it was earmarked for that legally or technically within an account. It's just kind of my perception of, we always gave it to Kent to keep Wilson Brewer going. And I just figured making it automatic was kind of where it would be spent, but maybe not.
Yeah, this is why we need this clarification, because the ordinance is very explicit on what it says, and as you look at our CIP for Parks and Rec, not all of that is going to be funded unless you decide to cut from somewhere else other than Park and Rec. So if you want to modify it and provide it for operating funds for Wilson Brewer Park or whichever, we need to know so that we can update the ordinance and go into the budget process knowing that.
It's currently going the 25% to Wilson Brewer Park.
Currently, the way it's being allocated for public improvements and projects at.
And what's it being used for?
Right now, because it's only been a year since we've been collecting it, and so
Okay.
when we collect only about $25,000, that's not enough to cover some of these projects.
Right.
So you save it up until you have enough.
You could say that it was spent in Wilson Brewer Park this year because we spent more than that in the basement of the depot, so.
Yeah.
So you could say it was spent there this year anyway. Because we spent more than 25,000 in the basement, didn't we? So it's, you know, it's a mute point really, depending on which way you. It's how it gets funded, but.
I think it should be for capital projects. And I think Wilson Brewer Park should apply like they did before.
Well, then if they're going to apply as they did before, then we might as well cancel this, because that means that now you're double dipping.
The whole idea of the 25% was that they didn't have to come back and ask them any Park and Rec, because at the same time, like I said, we were talking about.
Basically a commitment from the council to fund Wilson Brewer, if I remember it. Because we were basically going, look, how can we help them? And not have to come here every year and just give them like kind of a given.
That's the case, how did the wording end up the way it did then?
Yeah,
'Cause
that's what I mean. I don't, so that every other thing doesn't get a chance
The wording,
at it.
the wording ended up that way first. At the time, we didn't know how much they would need, and we didn't want to tie it down so that it was just for that one thing. So if there was more, because at the time, I think they're only getting about 20,000 a year, so.
And down the road, then you don't have to amend it per se. If all the capital improvements got down there, they raised all their own money or whatever, and all of a sudden they had all these donations and this projects were done, you don't want to limit it just to that. I guess that's probably the idea, is you don't want to limit it to that idea only either. You go to other parks as well, because at the time, like I said, we're talking like the beautification of not just them, but all the parks were being looked at and money was being spent on them, so.
I think that it should just stay the same as it is, because you either got to leave it the same as it is, or you have to do away with it altogether. So if it stays the same as it is, I mean, it was brought up that we don't have any money for Wilson Brewer Park, and yet there actually was money there for Wilson Brewer Park. So it's not a true thing, although so depending on which way you look at it.
Well, like
So
you
that-
said, John, we spent how much already on this last year?
Well, it's been said within council that there isn't money for certain things, and if there actually is, so I can't say one thing and.
I'd like to leave it as is,
Yeah.
because it's not earmarked for anything specific. We made a commitment to take care of the Wilson Brewer Park, and we've got to make a commitment to take care of the rest of our parks.
Yeah.
So I would like to leave it as is.
Me too.
Yeah.
We agree with that. Leave it as it is.
And to be clear, it doesn't go to operations. It's just going to be capital improvements and projects.
As it says. Okay. AB is a discussion and council action on Wilson Brewer Historic Park Commission's recommendation for current advisory committee to take over operation of Wilson Brewer Park as soon as possible, begin negotiation with Hamilton County. Now, my thought on that we're not voting. All we're doing is we're having a recommendation tonight, isn't it? You actually might want us to.
We're given two. We have two recommendations. We have
Well, I can't see how you can have two, because are you thinking that?
I'm saying it did not pass Parks and Rec, but we have a recommendation from another advisory board to move forward, but after hitting Parks and Rec, they said not to move forward. So we're taking a recommendation from Wilson Brewer to move forward and a recommendation of Parks and Rec to not move forward. So that's what I'm saying. We have two recommendations for our action.
Yeah. So the question really is, do we want to meet with are we going to meet with the county to see if we want to, if this is something we can do, or are we not going to meet? The thing gets thrown. Because without meeting with them, then we've missed an opportunity, perhaps. If we don't do anything, then we're back to where we are right now. I mean, we could move forward. Who knows? We move forward with this thing, and it looks like the county are prepared to help us with it. Then we get some more financial input and more input from outside of the city.
Are we missing an opportunity here?
Possibly, but we'll see.
It depends on who's explaining it to me. I find it very, very confusing as to
Well, I think that everybody's definitely confused about it. Well, that's why if we meet with somebody else and we keep talking, then at least we haven't thrown it down the drains.
And where's Kerry tonight?
Good question.
He's not here tonight.
Yeah.
We've had enough discussion with everybody else. We're now down to whether we wish to move forward or not. So he's not necessary tonight, Bob.
So Brianne is here and you wrote the minutes on the Parks and Rec. Could you give us a little update of why Parks and Rec did not want to move forward?
Or due to the financial implication on our current budget. With what has been proposed, we do not have any details on how all these projects are going to affect our budget, because they haven't been thought out, they haven't been negotiated, they haven't been decided on. So with our budget, which is already a tight budget, if certain things pass, the main thing that would probably, if we would have to make budget cuts within our department, the only thing that we have consistently spent every year is the outdoor pool. So that would be the first area that we would maybe have to make budget cuts on, reducing the number of days, because no matter what at the outdoor pool, we use the same amount of water, we use the same amount of chemicals, we use the same amount of labor. So that is the main concern, is that you're taking an amenity away from the community without knowing what the possible financial implications on our budget will be with this action.
That's a council decision, that whether we close the pool, and that's not yours.
No, it's just something that at the time, that is the one thing that is consistently spent within our budget. You can take away CIP, CEP items from us too, but there's never it's never a specific amount of money that's spent every year in those departments. So it's hard to say, well, we can cut this and this every year. The only thing that's consistent for us is the outdoor.
The one thing we're not going to cut is the outdoor pool.
I'm sorry, what?
The one thing we're not going to cut is the outdoor pool.
Which
So-
everyone, that's your decision.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the trouble. I spoke to one of the other Park and Rec members and asked them why it is. They said they refused, they didn't want to recommend go forward. Is purely because of that, because you told them if they move forward, then we wouldn't be able to have the pool. And I pointed out to her that council would not accept that as something. And she said, well, in that case, then I haven't got a problem moving forward with it. Because,
To be cut somewhere. a big issue.
Yeah, but there is more than park and rec. Because of, the general fund is not just park and rec. There is all departments. So the money can be saved. It doesn't have to just come out of park and rec. It's out of the general fund.
And that was just a proposed possible cut. It's not saying that that's.
But the piece I don't understand is why, so if we're trying to find more money, why would we not go and ask the county for help? If we're needing more money, why would we knock back somebody who's wanting to give you something to help? Why would you knock that back?
And I think this is a classic case of the confusion, right? So like, we're living in silos. We got the Wilson Brewer Board, we have the county, we have private donors, we have the council, we have advisory boards. So the biggest confusion for me is what the money is coming from, what strings are attached, what it's earmarked for by the donors or the county, and what that means for us. And I don't know if I really know for sure what that really means for us long-term financially. I don't really know for sure if an endowment comes with expectation of a building being built that we maintain, or if it comes with total, just here's the money, you do what you feel best. So right now, the action tonight is, do we want to let the Wilson Brewer Park Committee move forward as an independent trustee committee? Right, or something, I mean, I'm saying that right, to work with the county to figure out.
That's what I thought we were talking about tonight.
So what we'd be voting on really is not so much of a budget decision, but we all know that it's going to have ripples that could cause budget issues, right? Because we kind of know their direction where they want to take this. We don't know what that money means though. So in essence, we'd be giving up some control of this board to make a determination that we will then have to adjust and pivot for to accommodate for the budgets. And we don't know what budget, if it's general, Parks and Rec, where that's going to come from. So I think that's the cliff notes of the confusion is there's a lot of moving parts and levers being pulled that I don't really know how they all interact.
But what happens? So, if we don't do anything with the county and we leave it as it is right now, and it keeps going as it is, and we fix the depot, which is what the intention of council was in the first place, you still have to fund this, regardless of anything. Because that's what we committed to back in 2015, is that we were going to move forward with this and fund this more than we did in the past.
Fund what exactly? Fund what exactly?
Fund the park to
So
keep
your
it
take on
going.
it is
and
anything
actually,
that's added, we should fund. It doesn't matter what it costs.
it's not, you forget about the fact that somebody was talking about building another building there. You've got to realize that we committed to fund this thing more than it was in the past. It took the $50,000 a year away that was being spent on the park and reduced it where Kent had to go and ask for that to melt that tax money to keep running it. And that's fine. But we in 2015 decided that we were going to back remodeling the park and getting it to where it is now. So we're now going to decide that we're going to walk away from this and just let it deteriorate back to the way it was, or are we going to keep moving forward and fund it?
I don't think that
is exactly what we're talking about here.
No,
it's my question.
I don't agree with that.
Well, how do you
My interpretation, two things with this. My interpretation is we're looking at this paragraph and whether we support moving forward as this is written. And I'll say I don't, because there's too many questions. I'm fully in support of trying to get Parks and Rec together, the county together, get everybody in conversation about what could we do with that parcel? How could we expand the park and talk about how are we going to pay for it? Because until those questions are answered, I don't think you can move forward and commit to what could have downstream effect. I'm open to a meeting next week if you can get it going that
I'm
fast.
open to a meeting.
The way it's written is too vague and I wouldn't support that.
And the way
I
it's
agree
written,
with that.
it's basically giving up any control we have.
Yeah.
And that's what I fear. And if the only way this is going to happen is if there's some trustee board instead of the city, then that's not diplomatic on the other end of the table. I'm all for moving forward diplomacy and sitting down and talking to the county, talking to the Wilson Brewer Board and private donors and figure out, like Matt said, what's best for this. But At no point am I okay after, because the mayor's right, you know. Matt and I and the mayor at a point in 15, 16, we go, hey, we're gonna put some money into this. We're gonna get it right. We're gonna right the wrongs that it was, you know, grossly underfunded for years. The cabins, the walking trail, the amenities all being improved. I'm all for that. It's obviously generated some interest with donors. That's awesome. So it's working. But now that we've done all that, do we take the control we have of this park, we put all this money in and give it to a board of trustees that now have no oversight from us? But yeah, we might be stuck with the price tag of the maintaining of the facility. So that's why I think we just need to sit down, like Matt said. And again, I will make myself available for a meeting to get to the bottom of this. And I guess long story short, this really needs a spearhead. It needs someone to just kind of take it by the reins, bring every party into the same room and kind of get to the bottom of this with everybody hearing the same message.
Well, the county said they were happy to meet next week. Sometime if there's. So
I'm fine with that.
So,
if that's something you want to do.
so I'm good with meeting with the county, but I'm
No.
okay with the board of trustees.
Well, I don't think we should, that's why I didn't think we should pass anything with anything tonight. I think you just had a consensus to whether we go forward and talk to the county. And not vote on anything to do, whether we're gonna move forward, you know, not committing to doing anything other than go and talk to the county.
I will always vote for a sit down conversation. I'll always be okay with that as long as they're respecting us and not putting any strings on it. So I'm okay moving forward and talking with everybody. The sooner the better on that, because again, this has been one of those topics that has evolved and moved and switched its form several times. So I just really want to give even the community a better feel for what's going on. So if we can make this meeting happen within a week, that'd be ideal. But yeah, as this recommendation is written, I do not want to hand over our Whistleblower Park leadership to a trustee board at this point.
And I'd like to see a meeting with the county that has solid information. Not details, not just sort of futuristic plans with no details.
What days next week?
I'm good about every night.
Not Wednesday. So Monday or Tuesday.
Monday or Tuesday would be ideal.
Probably Tuesday is not a day that they probably won't want, I guess, because they normally have a meeting Tuesday.
Tuesday morning.
But I guess I
Yeah.
They have a meeting tomorrow morning.
Yeah, Tuesday mornings. So they wouldn't meet again next
So
week.
they may, because they said they would be prepared to come in and meet with us after. Because
So you're talking just,
most of you work, so.
Well, and I wouldn't mind.
talking just with the county then, or?
I wouldn't mind.
Well, we can see if we can get the other groups together there too, so that we get everybody.
Like Wilson Brewer.
I think it'd be great to invite the Wilson Brewer Park Committee as it is, and the Parks and Rec. County, and have a conversation.
I agree.
Do you think your group would be able to meet? And
I can reach out to them.
Yeah.
Let you know, I don't know.
I think, I mean, if it's not like, maybe if it's even, it's like some representation of.
Yeah.
You know, maybe.
I doubt we're gonna get it. We can get fair representation. If nothing else, I guess, get the questions, write them down and get them answered.
We're probably gonna make sure if they're gonna show up. We already deal with questions about whether things are, decisions or conversations being had outside of open meeting law. So if they're gonna show up with a quorum, let's just agendize their meetings.
We'll have to.
You're gonna agendize all of them.
So that's my point.
Yeah.
All committees, the county and the city hall are gonna be having a public meeting.
Have a separate agenda.
Yeah, it'll be a public, work session or whatever you want to call it, but you have to do notices and all that.
Do we need to have a motion on the recommendation tonight that is stated here, or?
No, I think you can.
Probably table it,
I'd love
Yeah,
to
they're gonna
table
get
it,
titled.
ending the conversation with.
because it may change, with ultimate.
Because we're not making decisions.
The table,
Well, table it or just let it die. I mean, it dies without a motion, because they may not even consider that motion. So it just dies and consensus or the motion.
We can bring it back later.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's a
It's not
question.
gonna be the same thing.
That's what I'm saying. It's
I
not
was
gonna be
gonna say,
the
if it's not gonna be the same thing, then I don't care. if
the
it dies.
motion dies.
Yeah.
But there probably should be a motion to have a meeting with the county and the other boards.
I think we just postpone. We won't let it die. We'll just postpone it.
Okay, right.
There is, in case you did want to reuse it as
okay, so you're tabling,
a table information.
Yeah, I disagree. I think we should kill it. Because the only way I feel that we'd ever hand over ownership of the board of that park would be if the county took ownership of that park. Since it's tied to our finances, I don't see why we would let trustees.
County can't take ownership of it.
Well, that's why it's a ridiculous thing to do this. I was saying that somewhat sarcastically and rhetorical, but like it's the only way I'd let something be run by a board of trustees is if it was not owned by us. And since we own it,
But we own Fuller Hall and we own Kendall Young.
and they fund themselves.
Since we own the library and we.
I think if you're gonna table it,
It's not actually true.
Well, I mean, Fuller Hall might not fully fund themselves, but the library, they do, I mean, they have a trustees that manage a endowment or a land, revenues.
But we're the overall caretakers of it and we do pay the utilities.
All we pay though is the utilities?
Okay, fair enough, but I
Safe cap.
even there is some truth to, yes, Fuller Hall is staffed by, us and, maintained. So I get that, but it's funded off of a trust that trustees are overseeing.
And that's the reason I'm saying don't kill it tonight, because I don't know what's gonna come from this discussion. If all of a sudden you go to this discussion and you have somebody that says, I'll give you guys 1,000 acres of farm ground and you can, as long as it's board of trustees and kind of similar, like build the exact same model as Kendall Young. And if it doesn't, which doesn't sound like maybe that's not gonna happen, I have no idea.
Not always, yeah, but.
But if it didn't happen, then the next meeting, you just kill it then and then pass a new motion anyway. So I don't know if it hurt the.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care. That's fine. I just feel like this is not the move to be made for a long time, if ever. But if that's what it takes with a large endowment and we're comfortable with the financial effects on us later, fine, it's. I'm not trying to make a stand here tonight. I'm just saying that I just don't know what. I don't know what we're even.
Well, I don't think we have to make a stand with anything tonight, just except that by killing this now, if you need to reuse it. So.
I'm just saying, yeah, the next meeting, if you've come up with a new plan, whatever the plan is at the next meeting, you just address this one and then move on to the next.
Well, it probably won't be next meeting, but yeah.
Whatever meeting is, I'm saying, yeah.
Fair enough. Then we can just let it.
Did
you
we
have a
come up?
motion second to table it.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So do you want to do a motion quick to set the special meeting?
Yeah.
But it's a TBA on time. I mean, really haven't done.
Come up with a day.
You might not be doing a motion, scratch that motion, because I mean, what are you gonna set it for? Time in the day or future? I mean, it's not really a scheduled meeting, so I don't.
No, we don't have to.
I think the mayor just
we
calls
have a
it.
motion and a second to table this item
Yes.
to a future.
Yeah,
agenda,
leave it at that.
right?
We voted, I think.
Yeah. And then the mayor will just have to call a special meeting at that time.
And then what days, I guess, are available to everybody next week?
I think whatever work,
Yeah, I'd make whatever work, but I prefer Monday or Tuesday.
No,
Same.
Tuesday.
same.
All right. I guess we'll see if we can get something set up Monday. Is there a parking, D&D meeting?
No, it's the last Monday of the month, so there's nothing more.
That we're agreeing if we have to have it. Okay. For promotion of Jan,
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you, everybody. Very patient with tonight.
You're approving the